Gukesh opens the game with 1 e4 and Alireza responds back with e5. Knight comes out to f3 and Alireza plays his knight to c6. Gukesh now chooses the Spanish for this all important clash, which is quite an interesting choice by him, and he doesn't go for the Italian, rather the Spanish. And knight f6, the Berlin. You can go for the Berlin endgame with short castles, but Gukesh prefers to keep it simple and goes for the anti-Berlin with d3. Firouzja brings his bishop to c5. Now you can take here, you can play c3 or you can castle. Gukesh goes for short castles, and this does allow Alireza to move his knight from c6, which can go to the d4 square, and he does it. He plays his knight to d4. This attacks the bishop here, so you have to be careful. Gukesh takes the knight, bishop takes the knight, and now the white knight comes to d2. So the plan is to put the knight on f3, attack the bishop, attack the pawn, and then win the bishop pair. Alireza pushes the bishop away. He plays his pawn to c6, and now the bishop comes back to c4 on the long diagonal. You can see Gukesh's time is still 1 hour 59 minutes, while Alireza has 1 hour 56 minutes. Pawn comes up to d6, and so he has a nice center now, and Gukesh pushes the bishop away. The bishop is going to drop back to the b6 square exactly, and Gukesh brings the bishop back to b3. So we have a very symmetrical position here. If black castles and I go knight f3, it's 100% symmetry. But first Alireza plays a5, and he has plans of a4 at the right time, so Gukesh has to remain careful there. Knight comes out to c4, attacking the bishop, and now Alireza saves the bishop by going to a7. Gukesh has 1 hour 50 minutes here and thinks for a massive 20 minutes, and then plays knight e3, which is perhaps not the best move in the position. Maybe Gukesh is angling for the knight to go to the f5 square, but for now Alireza simply castles, because he realizes that even if you jump here with the knight, black can take and push the pawn to d5. So that's the reason why Gukesh plays his queen to f3, and I think that's a good square for the queen, eyeing the f5 square. And now the pawn pushes forward to d5. So if you take here, then I can go a4, pushing the bishop away and then capturing it back. So he plays bishop c2, and Firouzja now plays this very little move g6, preventing the knight from coming to f5. So very good play here by Alireza Firouzja, and Gukesh plays his rook to e1, but black seems to be doing fine. Bishop e6, he takes the pawn in the center, and Firouzja can take back in multiple ways, but he takes back with the pawn, the best move there. Now you want to move your knight away to attack the pawn here, but then knight g4 could become very risky, and so Gukesh plays this very little move h3, stopping any of the black pieces from coming to the g4 square. And now Firouzja plays his rook to e8. Perhaps not the most accurate move, because the rook can get hit by the bishop coming to a4, and that's exactly what Gukesh does. He attacks the rook can't move up because queen takes f6, it's a free knight. Rook going back is not the smartest of ideas, and so Firouzja pushes the pawn to e4. Gukesh takes the pawn on e4, and black can recapture now, yes, and you can go to f4, but I think Gukesh can also come back to e2. He comes back to e2, keeps his queen nicely positioned, and while white's position is very compact, you can see the structure here, black has extended his pawns, so he has weakened squares. Now after knight f1 you will see that the b5 square is weak, e4 square is slightly weak, the bishop could come here, dark squares are slightly weak. So while black has more space, also has more weaknesses. But I like how Firouzja has put the queen on c7. He wants to put the bishop on c4. That is his idea. And that's the reason why Gukesh goes bishop b3, saying black that you cannot come to c4 anymore. And a4 played by Firouzja. And I think Gukesh will happily trade on e6. He takes on e6. Rook takes on e6. How will Gukesh continue? Will he offer the trade of bishops? Yes, he does. Bishop e3. So we are seeing a lot of trades happening. But Alireza has a very good move here. He plays a3. Fantastic move, because the moment you push your b pawn, you're simply going to lose the c pawn here. The queen can chop it off. So a3 is a fantastic move. Gukesh now plays c4. And the point is that if you take here, he wants to take with the queen. And if you play queen takes c4, I'll take on b7. That's his idea, to just simply simplify the position. But Alireza goes knight h5. And that's the reason why Alireza is such an exciting player. He is angling to come into f4. And Gukesh stops it with g3. And now he goes bishop c5. Wow. Very interesting play. In fact, Alireza is saying to Gukesh, fine, you can actually keep your structure intact. I don't even want to break it up. But in return, my pawn on a3 will be a monster. Also, look at this pawn chain here for black that black has now. Black is doing really well. Alireza has a great position. Gukesh takes. The queen will take now here. And f4 is on the cards. So I'm interested to see what is the move that Gukesh comes up with here. After queen takes c5. He brings his rook out to d1. And if you play f4 here, maybe queen g4 is what Gukesh is banking on. And actually Firouzja can play f4. He goes rook f8. He plays his rook to the f8 square. And I think he just is angling for this f4 break. Gukesh asks the black queen to leave that very important square. Queen comes back to e7. And while the f4 move starts to get very, very nasty and dangerous for black, I think Gukesh himself plays f4. 31 moves have been completed. 9 more moves to make. 19 minutes to Gukesh, 18 minutes to Firouzja. Now you have to go back with the knight. You can't take en passant because you simply lose the rook. So that's the reason why knight e6 is played. Knight f6 is played. And now Gukesh comes back with the rook. Why is this position so double-edged? The reason for it is that, wow, Alireza goes g5. The reason is that this knight which Gukesh has played is such a beautifully placed piece. Because knights are the best blockaders of the passed pawn, and the knight is placed there. It attacks the pawn on f5. It threatens to come to the d5 square. And when Alireza takes on f4, pawn takes pawn. Yes, the f4 square, f4 pawn is weak, but so is the f5 square. And don't forget, I have an extra pawn on the queen side. Queen f7 played here. And, well, you can't really go and take this because after knight h5, black is winning here. So that's the reason why he goes king h2. The best move in the position. And now knight h5 played by Alireza attacking the f4 pawn. That pawn needs to be protected, so the queen comes into f2 and defends the pawn. He goes rook to g6. The rook is well positioned here on the g file. I'm interested to see what Gukesh does. Gukesh comes in and attacks the f5 pawn. So there's pressure down here, and I guess in order to defend it, he has to go back knight to g7. Yes, the knight comes back to g7. A good move, defending the f5 pawn. And now Gukesh goes rook d1. 38th move with 8 minutes left. Alireza has only 1 minute 38 seconds left to make 3 moves, so he needs to speed up a bit. He goes rook h6. 2 more moves to make with just a minute on the clock. Mistakes can happen in such a position, and Gukesh himself takes the open file. Rook g1. And will Alireza move his rook back to g6? He can actually also think about queen h5 to put pressure here on the h3 pawn. He goes rook g6, offering a trade of rooks. And now Gukesh can take the rook, but he goes rook d1, and he's reached move number 40. He gets up from the chair and goes somewhere, maybe to the washroom. Alireza meanwhile thinks he's down to 40 seconds. He needs to make a move. Shouldn't lose on time. There's no increment. He goes rook h6. Kind of a tacit draw for, because the players have been moving back and forth from g6 to h6, g1 to d1 to back. Let's see what Gukesh does. Gukesh plays his rook to g1, and that too after a solid 14-minute think. And Alireza goes rook g6 here. And if Gukesh now goes rook d1, maybe it's threefold repetition. But queen h4 has been played here. The queen is very active, and Alireza takes on g1. And as we discussed a few minutes ago, White's knight on e3 is an absolute champ, putting pressure on f5 and blockading the e4 passer. Alireza moves his king to h8, and now queen h6 might be a good move. But he goes king f2, very calm, very cool, very good move. And now rook goes to g8. And this is the moment where I think Gukesh should play his queen to h6. It is a fantastic move, keeping the pressure. The queen slowly moves in like the death. But queen g5 has been played. And here there's a small little trick, because knight e6 takes queen g7, gives lot of play like this. But instead Alireza makes a bad mistake. This is a very bad move by Alireza. The reason being that now in this ensuing endgame, after the queens are traded, there is absolutely no play for him. In fact, it's only one-way traffic now with Gukesh pressing. He goes rook d6, he's attacking the g6 pawn. He wants to go to b6, attacks the b7 pawn. The rook comes to e8, and he's given up this pawn. Actually, Gukesh can simply take it, right? Maybe he has the idea of knight e6 then. And Gukesh chops off the pawn and tells Alireza, my friend, why are you giving me a free pawn? What's your plan? Alireza says, this is my plan. I'm attacking your f4 pawn. And in fact, now you can take this f5 pawn. Gukesh instead goes to d5. And here's a tricky line. You can go e3, because if I take, there is knight f8 discovered check. So you can take back, and then knight takes f4. And black is still fighting. But instead Alireza goes knight d4. A very tricky move. And somewhere, he has ideas like knight b3, a b3, rook a8, and try to push the pawn down the board. Could be there. But Gukesh simply goes rook b6 and he is calm and cool as a cucumber. He's attacking the b7 pawn. Maybe now rook b8 has to be played there, but Alireza goes knight to c2 and he tells Gukesh, I'm pushing here with e3. But here's the thing, Gukesh has only 5 minutes left. He plays rook b7 and he spotted that after point of this entire thing. So Alireza also spots it. That's why he doesn't go e3. He goes rook e6. But with that, he's simply now down 2 pawns. There are many ways to win. Rook e7 is the very accurate way to play. Wow. Fantastic move by Gukesh. Rook h6 played, moving away from the e file. Now these queenside pawns have to start rolling. What are they for otherwise? c5, let's go. And Alireza instantly plays knight d4. Both players down to a minute on the clock. Knight d4 stops the pawn from going to c6 forward. But I think Gukesh can get another pawn rolling there. Well, he's moving his king to g2. And perhaps Alireza wants to give a check on g6. He does give king f2 back. Well, there may be a repetition here, but of course Gukesh is not going to repeat, going to bring his king to g2. He has 1 minute 41 seconds. And with very little time on the clock, he pushes his pawn to b4. He came down to 7 seconds. Wow. Now 37 seconds, because 30-second increment has kicked in after move number 40. And Firouzja now has to take the pawn on h3. Otherwise, he has no real play. He takes the pawn on h3. Gukesh calmly comes to the g2 square to stop rook h2 check and losing the a2 pawn. Rook comes back. And now rook b7, very important move. It was important for the rook to come back, because otherwise there was knight f6 and this mate would have come in. So rook h6, rook b7, goes king g8. And how do you continue pushing the pawns? Yes, this is the way. b5, king f8. Now you can see Gukesh just making sure everything's fine. He pushes his pawn to b6. Excellent move. Pawns are rolling forward. 1 minute for Alireza Firouzja. He goes rook g6 check. King comes to f2. Rook h6. But I think this time you can allow the rook to come in and take this pawn, because I think you have rook c7, b7. And that's exactly what Gukesh does. He goes rook c7. Firouzja now understands that he is in big trouble. Not just trouble, but big trouble. He goes for a check. And Gukesh plays his king up to g3, attacking the rook. If the rook takes on a2, there's b7 with a check and then a queen. And so this is all over. Alireza Firouzja may have to simply resign the game. There's absolutely nothing he can do here. Gukesh has managed to play a brilliant game. Firouzja resigns.